Hello, and you are listening to The Professional Artist on 1077 UPRN. This is Echo Chernick, and I am live with Rose Catherine Kahn. Hi, Rose. How are you doing
Hello.
today?
I am doing awesome. I am so happy to be chatting with you. This is like the peaceful time in my day because I don't know if anybody's listening to this after recording, but currently it is December 21st. So we are in the middle of like the pre-holiday rush. It's so chaotic. And I'm like, oh, this is a nice quiet hour where I just get to sit and talk to Echo and nobody's going to interrupt me. And it's wonderful. So
And
I'm
we are
so happy to be
one
talking to
thing
you.
we share in common is we are both illustration moms. And so right at
Mm-hmm.
different points in our career. So right now you have little ones and you have them locked away. I remember
Yes.
those years. They're behind glass with their faces pressed against the glass. And I remember
Yeah.
working in the studio whenever I had clients. I'm like, don't bother mom. And I'd be on the phone with
Mm-hmm.
the clients. They'd have their faces pressed against the studio glass, like looking at me. And I'd be on the phone
Yep.
with the client. And they'd be like, mom's on the phone. Don't make any noise. And but they'd be quiet, but they'd be looking, like watching. And their dad's like, don't fire mom. Mom's doing work. So, so you're doing that right now, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, quite literally. So I'm taking this call. I'm out on my lanai because I live in Orlando, Florida, so I have that luxury in the middle of December. But behind the screen is the house, is the kitchen windows, and yes, my children have pressed their faces against the glass. Our original plan was my husband was going to take all three kids out, but unfortunately he has a fever because when you have kids, they bring illness after illness after illness, and you just you have to adapt, which will be, I guess, the theme of our conversation today. This idea of how to figure it out when life keeps changing and life keeps throwing interesting challenges at you as being both professional artist and mom.
Yes. Well, first, people can find your work at RoseCatCon, RoseCatKhan.com. And
Yeah.
you do awesome, gorgeous work, especially on your puzzle work, which they can find
Yeah.
in Target mostly. I see your work in Target. I always put it to the front
Yes.
and center and make it all so it's
Thank
all
you.
straight and pretty.
Thank you.
So my kids are always like, "Oh, there's Rose's work," and we always make it all pretty and put it in the front. So you have like the
Yeah.
awesome dragons and the dragons in the bakeries and stuff like that. They're
Mm-hmm.
gorgeous. So
Yeah.
that's my favorite one. But yes, so your work is just so colorful and beautiful. I love your puzzles. But how many
Thank
puzzles have you
you.
done? A
Oh my
million?
goodness. I think I'm at over 25 at this point. I haven't updated my website, I realize. And you know how it is with illustration, you will do some work and then it'll go to a publisher and then it doesn't hit market for a year and a half later. And they don't always tell you when that's about to happen. And then it's like, oh, surprise, this work that I forgot about. Oh, it's for sale now. And yeah, so I think I'm at over 25, 26, and this year was a weird year because I did an incredibly elaborate illustration that in its own should have been about 6 images, but it was
Wow.
huge. It was a 6 foot puzzle design, 7,000 pieces, and we could talk about that one a little bit later in the chat. But yeah, so let's just say I've over 25 puzzles, and then I've also designed figurines, clothing for apparel, wall art. So I'm in the side of illustration known as licensing, which if you're listening, you're not familiar. Basically, I create a bunch of pretty art and then I have an agent who shows it to different manufacturers and companies, and then they will license the art for a certain period of time for a certain royalty, and then I get like a tiny bit from every single sale. And so I really never know where my art is going to wind up. Like right now, I just signed a deal with a fabric company that often has their work in like Joanne Fabrics and Michaels and stores like that. I'm like super excited about that one. That was on my bucket list. But yeah, I've done a ton of different things, and most of my work is in fantasy illustration. And then prior to that, I was a graphic designer. I've done corporate graphic design. I have a master's degree in education. So I've been like K-12 art teacher, college professor. I've basically worn a ton of hats within the art industry over the past 20 years. So,
And to be clear, you get paid up front for the puzzle designs and then you get
yes.
royalties. So,
Yeah,
and
so they're advances a lot like just like the book publishing industry. That's how the puzzle industry happens to work. Yeah.
so, and to be clearer,
Hmm.
an advance on royalties is basically you get what you get paid is a certain amount, which is the advance on what the projected royalties will be. And once you've met that certain amount, then you get the royalties on top of that amount. So once you,
Yes.
this is against the projected royalties. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
But you don't
yeah.
have to pay it back if you don't meet that royalties.
No, 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 which is one thing that's really nice because at first in the beginning I was a little nervous about that when the check would come in. I'm like, okay, well, what if they don't sell? I mean, once we had an issue where I got a nice sizable check on a very elaborate image, and I did sometimes I do the work custom for the manufacturers. They'll come to me because they want a certain design and that they know I could create based on previous work. And so I did the work, and they actually never ended up publishing the image, but I got to keep the royalties. So, you know,
And do you have the
and then I
copyrights
still,
to the piece?
oh, absolutely. Everything
So you
I
can,
do, I retain my copyrights.
so
Yeah.
you can still publish prints of it and everything else. So,
Hmm.
and if you can't
Yeah.
see the comments, Joe Fox is saying that your creativity is unreal. I wish I had that.
Oh,
So,
thank you. Thank
hi,
you.
Joe. So, but yes. So you still get you get to go ahead and make posters or prints or whatever. What licensing do they have? Do you know? Is it industry exclusive or
In terms
you,
of for the puzzle industry or
the
for
puzzle
Uh,
industry or
so
gaming
theirs is
industry?
it's very granular, which really surprised me. So there's first of all there's U.S. versus international rights, and usually the European market is separate from the U.S. market. I've had work in Australia. I'm so excited when I had my work on the shelves of Kmart in Australia, and one of my fans sent me a photo, and I was like, "That's so cool."
That's so
So
cool.
it breaks it up by region, and then on top of that, piece count. So, for example, a wooden puzzle company would not be in competition with like your Seiko or your Buffalo, which is the common brand you see at Walmart and Target, which my work is at Target and Walmart. And so, because it's a different price point, they're not competitive. Like a premium wooden puzzle would like retail for like $60. Something you find at Walmart would be $10 on sale at the Christmas season. So because they're not in competition, those are considered two separate things. So I could have one design and it could be with a wooden puzzle company with more about a mass market puzzle company, for lack of a better descriptor. And then I could have that same image with one company in Europe with another company in Australia. So really one image can really get around. And these are for durations of typically 3 years. So once that happens, and then the license lapses, if they choose not to renew, then they could be eligible for another puzzle company. So
So
yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah.
So cool. And now they
It's
pay, and then
fun.
they usually pay you a percentage of the base cost to renew the license.
Hmm.
Probably. Yeah. That's usually how that
Yeah,
works.
something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Cool. Very cool. So, and that all goes through your licensing rep usually.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
sweet. Sweet. So I'm just more spelling it out for our listeners so they understand how that
yeah.
all works.
Hmm.
So cool.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that works good to have license have the royalties coming in, especially when you have kids and don't have time to make new pieces. So
Yes.
because you've also, besides making all the puzzles this year, you also, made a baby. So that's
Yeah.
been keeping you busy.
Yeah. Yeah. I also did that. Yeah. So my children right now, I have a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 10-month-old.
Oh my
So
God.
it has been quite an interesting
Boy, a 10-month-old
year.
boy.
10-month-old boy. Yeah, yeah,
Boy,
yeah,
which is
yeah.
disturbed,
So
decided are quite adventurous. Boys
yes.
are more adventurous than the girls I hear. I have
Yeah.
girls, so I don't know.
Well, I have a daughter and two sons, and I don't know. My daughter is actually the one so far that has like broken things and almost broken herself in more ways because she'll be the one doing flips off the couch and other crazy things. The other day she got stuck on the top of there's this piece of playground equipment that was probably 10, 12 feet up, and she climbed to the top. Very ambitious child, and then she got stuck and I couldn't help her down. So my husband had to go bring the ladder and help her down. So
Oh no.
yeah, so I would say, maybe, I don't know if gender would quite, those norms would quite apply, at least not to my children. But regardless, my 10-month-old baby is into everything right now. And it's been very challenging going through this transition. So before we started the recording, Echo and I were talking about how, the children change and you have to adapt when you are like working parent, and especially in a freelance industry like illustration. And so I've been through it with the older two, and now I'm going through it again with the younger one. And I had this period of time where I could like really work when the little guy was baby, did a lot of napping, did a lot of cuddling. And that's when I was able to do some really great work this year. And now he is not little cuddly baby. He is all over the place. And I'm finding challenges again for getting work done. And so I haven't figured it out.
Yeah, I remember that being a lot harder. I would get up very early in the morning and do work, and we'd do a lot of switching off and stuff. I still get up early in the morning and do work. And I found in Florida they have the voluntary preschool. I started putting them in voluntary preschool pretty early, so I would be able to go work when they were in the preschool, and then I got a person to watch them in the mornings and just walk them around the neighborhood while I would get some work done.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be creative. So,
I remember you telling me that story. I actually stole your idea, and I also have a baby walker, and she's a teacher who lives in my neighborhood. And like just before she goes into school, she walks my baby for an hour every morning. So,
yep. I was a grandmother, and I forget where she was from, and she didn't speak really very much English at all, but she'd come over and make me flan, and she'd play with the baby, and she'd walk her around, and she was fantastic. She didn't really speak a lot of English. She loved playing with the baby, and she just was lonely, and I'd pay her not very much, but she didn't care. She just mostly wanted to play, and she'd cook all these really great foods and stuff, including the flan. The flan was really good. She's like, I made them then, and I made this, and I'm like, oh, cool. So, and I would go see the ducks and stuff. So it was, but I'd be able to get some work done, which was fantastic. So, but as they got older, the kids. One of the things. Oh, you asked me for tips and tricks and things. One of the things I did a lot that I am glad I did though as they got older is I took a lot of photo reference of them. So now when I need photo reference of kids, I have a lot of photo reference of my kids doing different poses. Like I have like Cat, I have pictures of Cat in different dresses. Like I have a lot of reference of her like holding up her skirt with like things in her skirt, like a little princess, like holding baubles and things and crouching down like she's picking stuff out of a river. And I have all these different reference shots I shot of them when they were little that I could get at angles that I can't get now. And especially nowadays with AI and everything being a problem with finding photo reference. I mean, if you've got kids and you're growing up and you got them at different ages, take all kinds of reference. And you can post them at reference and be like, hey, mom needs reference, post them at different reference. Put them in a swimsuit, get them at different reference angles and, post them. And then, and then pay them an ice cream because, your bottle's complicated. It has much ice cream. So, but yeah, you don't have to you don't even have to use their likenesses. You could change their likenesses if you're uncomfortable, but at least you have the shape and you can just save it for, later. I mean, I'm still using the body poses that I have, but even now, 20 years later, I'm like, I still have this reference, that I've taken. So, which is,
a good reference never goes stale. And that is so important that you mentioned in terms of with now the industry shifts with AI and how much it's permeated. Like I used to occasionally grab stock photography, right? If I needed a reference for something, and now it's so much more difficult that I have to take the extra time to figure out, is this even real? But because I do have such a massive reference library, I can go through and I try. That's always my first place to go to if I need reference before I look elsewhere,
So that baby is not getting any younger. Put him to work.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Get those baby pictures going. Hold the spoon. Get those chunky little fists holding that spoon because you don't know if you need those fists. You might need reference there. So
I think back, like I saw this meme that said something along the lines of like, there's 10 photos of me that exist between the ages of like 4 and 5, and there's like 10 photos of my children that exist between like 4 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And that is true. I do take a lot of photos. I'm constantly sending them to the grandparents too, you know, and my
Yeah.
kids are always doing funny things, silly stuff. Like when my daughter was stuck on that piece of playground equipment and she was not happy, she was like, kind of sobbing because I was like, don't worry, mommy's gonna get you down. I just need to take a few photos first, please.
Yeah, stay there, right there. I need to.
Yeah.
But even you know, though, there's a difference between taking pictures of your kids and taking reference of your kids.
Yes.
Because you know, because you have to kind of pose the reference and be like, all right, do this. I need you to hold this just like this, because reference is different than just pictures, because you take it at different angles.
Yeah.
So you know, I've had them pose for me, and I have pictures of them with models. I mean, I have some posters I've done where I've actually had them pose, and I have pictures of them through like my whole career where I have them holding lights with models. Like I have pictures of one of my models, and she's posing, and then I have my I guess Runa was probably, I don't know, 8, and she's holding the light. She's just sitting there holding the lights, you know, or she's holding the reflector, and she looks bored. Like, okay, mom, you know, can I go now?
Yeah. It's always okay, I'm done. Can I go now?
Yeah. Okay, you know.
Yeah.
But then the door, she's sitting on the ground and she's holding like a soccer ball, pretending it's a dragon egg. Like, okay, I'm holding a soccer ball, I'm pretending it's a dragon egg, you know. But she's, you know, they're in there, like they're just all through my work. So it's so you definitely use the family. That's why they're there.
Yep.
So
oh, absolutely.
But but they get used to it though, and they've been used to going to shows with me since they were little, and now both my kids are artists. So yeah, so that's probably going to happen. So
yeah. I do the show thing, and COVID kind of messed things up, right? And so I kind of stopped doing shows for a while, and then I moved. I used to live, I mean, Echo knows this, but for everybody who's listening, I used to live in New York, in Rochester, New York. And 2 years ago, I moved to Orlando, Florida. And I haven't really, there's such a great convention scene here, a lot of outdoor shows, run fairs, things like that. And I haven't fully started back up. And I know my kids are really excited to get back into, to get the opportunity to go to conventions. Because prior to this, it was like, oh, well, you're too little. And now they're ready to like help sell things. And like I just did a little arts and crafts fair at the local brewery, and my daughter wanted to set things up and pose my books and do my prints. And she was ready. Like one of the vendors walked by, and immediately she was like, here's my mom's stuff. She writes fantasy novels and she does puzzle illustrations. And I'm like, holy cow, kid. Like I didn't ask you to do that, but that's awesome. Okay, cool. So I'm looking forward to getting to your phase where my kids are like really like next to me, being kind of business partners.
Yours are plenty old enough. Oh my goodness. Yeah, MegaCon was my first show, and that's in Orlando.
Yeah. I'm trying to get into that one. I haven't been able to get off the wait list yet.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that was my very first show.
If anyone's listening and knows one of the show coordinators, hi.
There's a wait list, really?
I'm awesome. Yeah, and I haven't been able to. I mean, I'm going for Artist Alley table. I don't feel like doing the $1,000 for a vendor booth at this moment, just because my life is so crazy and I don't want to bite off more than I can. Yeah.
That was my first show ever. It was an Artist Alley at MegaCon. So you definitely do that one for sure, and your kids will love it. So, and then I let them walk around Artist Alley, and they loved it. So,
were you the one who was telling me somebody who used to put balloons on their kids so they could tell where they were?
Was me.
That was you. Oh my gosh!
Because a lot of times the Artist Alleys they have like specifically, I think MegaCon and stuff, they have like either a different color carpet or a different color skirts on the front of the Artist Alley tables, and I'll tell the kids, okay, you have to say where all the booths have the yellow skirts or the blue carpet or whatever, and they're like, okay, and then I would give them a balloon, or I tie a balloon onto like the 5-year-old, and I'd be like, you have to stay there with the blue carpet, and I'd be able to stand at my table and watch the balloon just go around Artist Alley, and they'd be like, well, where's your kids? I'm like, oh, right there, I see the balloon. And they'd come back, and they had a book. I think I told you this. They had a book I printed up the book of their sketches, and it was a two-sided book, so that one of them had sketches on one side, the drawings on one side, and then you flip it over, and it was the drawings on the other side. So it was a two-sided book, and they'd sell their
Uh-huh.
books for like $1, so that neither of them sold more books than the other kid,
Yeah.
and so that they would sell until they had enough money to go run around and buy buttons. And this is when the other artists
Yeah.
were selling their buttons for like a quarter or 50 cents, and they'd get
Yeah.
enough money, and then they'd run around, and then they'd
Uh-huh.
spend all their money on buttons, and then they'd run out of quarters, and then they'd come back, and then they'd sell more buttons, more books,
Hmm.
and then they'd run around again, and they wouldn't leave Artist Alley, and their balloon would be like boop boop boop
Yeah.
boop 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 boop. And so this is what they do for like 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
So, and it was great.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so it's fantastic. But yeah. So anyway, you've had quite a journey. How did you get started with your career?
Oh my goodness. So yeah, it has been a journey. Um, so I've always been an artist. I was one of those kids who, when I was in third grade, I was drawing horses, and I'd get horse books out from the library, and I would just be not paying attention at all at school because I'd just be drawing horses. And then that evolved into, I started to get into Marvel comics and X-Men and like drawing those characters. And then I got into Star Wars, and I loved those characters, and then Sailor Moon and anime and those sorts. So always an artist. And when I was in high school, I took a lot of art classes, AP classes. I went to college with degrees in illustration and graphic design. I graduated, and I was a graphic designer because when I graduated, I had terrible imposter syndrome. And one thing about the illustration program, what they were very good at, like letting us know what we were doing wrong. But at the very end, I wish there had been a class where they like pumped us back up and like let us know, yeah, you got this, because I felt like I was into fantasy illustration, but as an adult now, looking back, I can see that the faculty was, maybe they were more like old school editorial illustrators, some children's book illustrators. They didn't quite get the genres I was interested in. And so I didn't quite get the encouragement that I maybe needed at the time. So basically when I graduated, I was like, I'm shelving this whole graphic design, or excuse me, illustration thing. I'm going to be a graphic designer because that seemed like the lucrative path. So I was an in-house graphic designer for a while. And I found I didn't love corporate graphic design when you're sitting like in a cubicle farm and everything around you is a sea of gray. And I really struggled with that environment. So I was like, well, the logical thing is let's run back to school and get a master's degree in education. And so I'm K-12 certified teacher. And I loved that. But unfortunately, when I graduated into the 2008 recession when they started cutting teaching positions. It was really hard because in New York, the environment was really great for teachers. And then we went from having a plethora of available jobs to, oh, we're cutting our existing staff. So for a while, I was in this balancing act where I was teacher and graphic designer because I was able to get work in web design, and I was balancing between the two of them. And I was doing some freelance. And one of the places I freelanced at, I made a friend who was like, "Hey, I'm doing this convention at a local college, and I know the art you draw for fun. Why don't you bring that stuff and do this convention with me?" And I'm like, okay. And I did, and I loved it, and I was hooked. And like that was like a huge turning point for me because I started to draw the fantasy illustration I loved, and every time I go to a convention, I get a lot of positive feedback. So that's when I started doing the dragons and get the notice for that. And the more positive feedback I got from the convention crowd, the more I drew, and the better my portfolio got. So I was like doing that for a while, and I was married, and we decided to have our daughter, and I was pregnant with my daughter. And this was like a huge turning point in my career because we realized we needed an actual house because we had been renting apartments at that point because kids come with, all their toys. And I remember standing in Babies R Us back when Babies R Us was a thing. And I was going over the things with my husband, like, okay, we need a crib, we need this, we need that, we need a stroller. And then he had this look of panic on his face because he's like, where are we going to store a stroller in our apartment? Like we don't have room. So we're like, okay, let's get a house. But then houses are not cheap. And I remember looking at the mortgage and feeling like I got to do something. Like I have to bring in more income somehow. And I decided to start sending my portfolio out to agents. And prior to that, I just did not have the mental fortitude to do that because I was still the college student in my mind. And I sent it out, and I remember my agent's website. On the website, it said, you know, when you submit your portfolio, please expect to hear back in 2 weeks, right? So I sent it out, and I sent the work I had been doing for conventions, a lot of like the dragon art, and my agent texted me, or excuse me, emailed me back in 2 hours and was like, your work is awesome. He's like, let's chat. I think it would be great as figurines. And I'm like, figurines? I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. Yeah, so I just like stumbled into licensing because I didn't fully understand what licensing was until that point. And then my agent started to like make awesome things happen. So that was like the first pivotal moment in my career. And at that point, a lot of my work was licensed out for, I think, cross stitch patterns. It did get made into figurines through Pacific Giftware and Unicorn Trading. What else do we do? Like, but the puzzle stuff came later, and that was another big shift that happened. So I was pregnant with my son, and I was, at the time, I was working at a, so I was, what was I was kind of the director of a summer camp program. And I was doing that. It was an art and technology summer camp. I was pregnant. My daughter at the time was 2. And I was diagnosed with a brain tumor.
Just to make life interesting, right?
Yeah.
So how did you know you had a brain tumor?
Yeah, it was I was having a lot of symptoms where I was having weird sensations on my face. And I was funny. I was like, I went to one neurologist who was like, oh, it's fine. It's just pregnancy hormones and anxiety. And I'm like, oh, well, I've got this weird thing on my face. I have some ringing in my ears. And he's like, it's just hormones, right? So I go back to my OBGYN and I was like, oh yeah, this is what they said. And my OB was like, I'm going to send you to a different neurologist. So they sent me to, I don't know if it made a difference that this neurologist happened to be female and took me more seriously. So they did imaging, because actually the first neurologist literally said to me, well, you're pregnant, so you can't have an MRI. That's what he said. And I'm like, I didn't think that was right, but okay. But the second, because you can have an MRI as long as you don't have contrast dye, right?
Yeah, you can have an MRI. Actually, if you look up MRIs of babies, they're really creepy.
Yeah.
So, if you ever looked up an MRI of a baby?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
This is why the reason they don't do MRIs of babies. It's like, whoa. So
I love medical stuff. Love that stuff. So anyways, yeah, so they discovered, and I was probably maybe 4 or 5 months pregnant at the time. I was like, oh yeah, you have a brain tumor. But very specific, it was a vestibular schwannoma, meaning the tumor is located on the vestibular nerve, which connects your ear to your brain and is also in charge of like balance and hearing, basically. It's the vestibular cochlear nerve, right? So it was like not in the spot of my brain that was like deadly, but certainly not in a great spot, because it's that area of your brain. There's a lot of important wiring that goes through there.
I don't think anything in your brain is very good.
Yeah. And luckily, these types of tumors are not traditionally malignant. They're most of the time they're benign tumors. So I had to wait until my son was born, and then I could have treatment. And fortunately, this type of tumor, you can have treatment via radiation. It's called stereotactic radiosurgery, SRS, where basically, I love this stuff. They take like all these beams of energy, they're low power radiation, and where all the beams converge, that's like on the tumor, and they like fry it in your brain. So I didn't have to have actual surgery, which I was grateful for, but it was still not great because you are talking about shooting radiation at your head. So, and at the time, my son was like a month old, and I once again still had the 2-year-old, and still doing this illustration stuff. So then what had happened at that point was the summer camp that I was the director of. And my supervisor, the one I had worked with for years and years and years, it had recently retired. So I had a new supervisor. And usually at that point in the calendar year, we start to gear up to advertise the different camps. And I was in this position because a lot of the camps we did were like animation, Photoshop. So it really fit into my wheelhouse of my background as a graphic designer. And I didn't hear anything from the director. I was like, or the director above me. I was like, well, this is weird. So I shoot her an email and she's like, oh, well, we've restructured the department and we're cutting your position, but there's a kind of a similar position that we could hire you at half the rate of pay. And I'm like, what? And the rate of pay that they're offering was like not what you give to somebody who has a master's degree in education, who has the experience and position. I'm like, are you kidding me? And so like that was like a super, super low point for me. And I was just like looking at what I had in front of me. I was like, okay, well, the work I was relying on as like my stable income, well, that's gone. I have a 2-year-old, a 1-year-old. I was still experiencing the impacts of having the radiation treatment for the brain tumor because you get post treatment swelling in the brain, right? And then you have to be on some really powerful steroids, and those have nasty side effects. And so I was really in a dark place, a tough place. And I just said to myself, you know what? I have this licensing agent, because at that time the work I was getting in licensing, it was nice, but it wasn't anything you could live off of. It was, little things, because I was still new to licensing. I didn't have a huge portfolio. We hadn't made those connections yet. So I said to myself, you know what? As long as I could draw, I'll be okay. And this is the phrase I kept saying to myself: as long as I could draw, I'll be okay. So I decided, with the time that I was benchmarking or earmarking rather, to work on the summer camp, instead I was like, you know what? I'm going to do the most elaborate piece I could possibly draw. And I'm going to go back to my roots, and I'm going to draw unicorns. Because when I started as an artist, in 3rd grade, drawing horses was my thing. I was like, I'm just going to draw horses. I'm going to draw what I love. I'm going to just draw. I'm going to make this the most flippant, elaborate piece I could possibly do. And that's the piece that's now, if you look through my portfolio, it's called Twilight Marketplace. It has 2 unicorns, and they're running through this scene, and the unicorns are decked out in all these jewels and pretty things, and there's all these like baubles and things for sale, because there's like a marketplace stall that you're peering through to see these 2 unicorns that are just running through. No riders, no humans, no anything, just pretty elegantly decorated unicorns. So I draw this piece, and about 2 months after that, I go to Surtex with my agents. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Surtex stands for Surface Texture. It's a show in New York City. The industry. Have you ever been to it, Echo?
No, I haven't.
You know the one show I'm talking about?
No, not going to New York. No.
So it's a lot of things that would be good at postcards, stationery, that sort of thing, but also licensing on products. And I didn't know this at the time, but there were people in the puzzle industry who would come to this show as well. And the art director from Ravensburger was looking through my portfolio, and she sees my Twilight Marketplace piece, and she's like, oh, this is pretty. This is awesome. She's like, can you do that? And then she looked at the dragons, and she's like, but do something like this, but can you put dragons in it? And that would be really good for what Ravensburger would like to produce at this time. And I'm like, yes, but at the same time, so this was May, and I'm like, when do you need it by? And she's like, August. Now remember, I was still getting over the whole brain tumor thing. My daughter was about 2.5, right? And if you're a mom and you're listening and you hear me saying a 2.5-year-old, and my son was about 6 months old, right?
Oh my God.
So, and I didn't have like daycare. I didn't have a babysitter. I had no idea how it was, because the unicorn piece was done over several months and had no specifications. It was just like what I wanted to do, right? But this puzzle thing, I never illustrated a puzzle before, and I was like, of course I'll just say yes and then figure it out later. And somehow I figured it out. And back then I was doing all my work in Photoshop on a Cintiq tablet. So I was literally tied to a desk. Now I do my work in Procreate on an iPad. So I'm mobile, I can go wherever. But somehow, like between the kids' naps, putting on Sesame Street, I had a really nice neighbor who would occasionally take my kids because my daughter was the same age as her son, so she'd take them all to a playground, and just somehow I made it work, and I hit the deadline, and I still don't know how I made that deadline because it was a very large image actually now in retrospect because it became a 2,000-piece puzzle for them,
Pure
Dragon Valley.
willpower. It's just pure
Yeah,
willpower
yeah, it was
at that
like
point.
it's
Like, I will
and a
make the
bit of
deadline.
it was spite too, because going back to that unicorn piece I had initially done, like that's what fueled that, because I was so angry at how my life had changed in a way that I had not anticipated and I couldn't control. And I just kind of like dug it all and put it into the Dragon Valley. And then after Dragon Valley, I went to another show with my agent, and Buffalo Games saw it. And that was a huge turning point because Buffalo is the big one and now they own Seco. They're in Walmart and Target. And they were like, oh, we love this. And the art director of Buffalo at the time was like fabulous because he was really into fantasy. And he was like, can you do like 3 pieces for us? Because I showed him some sketches and I'm like, sure. And like from that, ever since that point, I've just been doing puzzle after puzzle. And now I've done work for Schmidt and Spiel. I've done work for White Mountain Puzzles. Crazy Art had a line of puzzles, and then a lot of more niche brands as well. And it just hasn't stopped. And I was like, I didn't like set out to be a puzzle illustrator, but looking back, I'm like, this is where I belong. I love just making tiny, intricate things. I really am amused by putting like, here's a little mouse wearing a top hat and they're eating a pizza and they're hiding in the bottom of the dresser or something like that, you know?
Oh yeah, you
So,
have to put all these little details in there. I mean,
mhm.
it's just so intricate.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you
So,
go about like composing the entire thing without it ending up being just cluttered?
oh, that is a really, really good question. If you're a college student and you're about to hear me say this, like it goes right back to the thumbnail sketch, because if it does not work as a black and white thumbnail, it will not work as a final image. And so I usually, all of my images have that major focal point, and that's the first thing that gets done and something that leads the eye. And I'm constantly thinking about, I mean, really, if you break down my images, a lot of them are almost formulaic. I mean, we all tend to have our formulas that we lean on once you've been doing this for quite a long time. And I tend to do this circular thing where I bring the eye in. But no, it definitely has to work as a thumbnail. And then once the big pieces are in, then it's doing in the little pieces and always checking your values. Because I work digitally, I'll switch it to grayscale and check the values. But it's not easy, but it with time and practice, it becomes very, I guess I don't want to use the word easy. You know what I'm saying, Echo? It
Yeah.
becomes like, you have a path to make it work. And when you're in the trenches with a piece and you're like, oh, this isn't working, you trust the process.
Yep.
That's what
Yep.
I'm looking for in order to end up on the other side.
Right. Now
So,
yours have a
yeah.
lot of different colors in it. You have so many colors in your pieces.
Hmm.
Oh my gosh. So do you ever
Yeah.
do you ever use any of those filters to see how they look with different like levels of color blindness and stuff? Do you ever
Oh,
try
you know
that?
what? I haven't. I probably should. The
I've
thing
had to
with
do that
the
with some games, like some games that
oh,
when I designed games like card games, I've had to run the
yeah,
filters on 'em because if you're playing card games, they have to be playable for
yeah.
people who have color blindness. Not so much with puzzles, I don't think, because you're still gonna the people with the color blindness are still gonna be matching the same colors that they
Yeah.
see. But with games, the
Oh.
colors can't be confusing. So I was wondering if you ever tried. Yeah, I think there's a Photoshop in Photoshop. There's actually a setting for it now. You can go and you
Yeah.
can turn it on and off and see what they look like
Oh,
for
I
different people.
do that. That sounds like
Yeah.
so. The part of the reason my work has so much color is earlier on when I was working with that art director from Buffalo Games, he was like, more color, more color, more color, because for them, so if you look in a shelf of puzzles in Walmart, you're gonna see there's like kind of two different types of puzzles. There's the big IP, like your Disney and your Star Wars, and those will be like good images, but they're like the focal point of those is they're selling it because they want somebody who likes the character
Right.
to buy it, right? And so it doesn't matter. And then the other type of puzzles are more like your Charles Wysocki and your Amy Stewart's, and those where it's an image that has lots of little details. Because when you have a puzzle image that has a lot of little details, it's much easier to assemble, and it's an enjoyable process. And when you have all those little details, that tends to be the higher piece count. And when you're doing all those little details, so if you look at mine, I have color regions. So actually looking at the piece right now, that's our background. It's the Dragon's Race, right? So you have the left side and the right side of the image, and the left side of the image is all yellows and warm colors, and the right side of the image is all cool colors. And so
the left side is daytime. The right side is
yeah.
night. I'm just describing for people on the radio. So
yes. Oh, sorry, radio
okay.
listeners. I forgot about you, but you can go to my portfolio, which is at rosecatcon.com, and you can look at the image we're discussing.
It's got a castle in the middle, and it's day
yeah.
left, night on the right. So
yeah, lots of dragons everywhere. But if you were somebody assembling the image and you're separating out your colors, you're like, okay, so this is the pile of blues and purples, and this is the pile of the yellows and the greens and the oranges, and it clues them into how to assemble the puzzle. So I'm always thinking about the person who's putting the image together while I'm designing the whole thing.
yeah, which is what how I do when I design a puzzle. If I were to like put all those bright purples together for that dragon in the corner, I'd be like, oh, here's all those bright purples, and here's all those yellows. That's going to be where the sun is and stuff. And then you kind of put a pile together for those. This must be that bright, that bright tree in the corner and stuff. So yeah, no, that's exactly how you put a puzzle together, which is awesome. So. But so it doesn't really matter because when people when they're colorblind, they'll see different colors, but their colors they'll see will be different, but they'll still do the same thing. They'll still put the piles together just the way they'll see them. They'll just see them differently. So
yeah.
But what I do for the game design, they have to make sure that the colors don't get mixed up. That's why I have to make sure that I run that filter.
Oh,
because they can't look the same. Because sometimes like that, two colors can look the same. Like that tree and the wing might look too close to somebody that's colorblind. But they might look totally different to someone who's not colorblind. So
that sounds like an interesting project. So what can you talk at all about this particular project, or are you still under NDA for this?
I don't know. This is a long time ago. This is
okay.
The one that I did. I think the last one I did that I had to do that for was the Peacocks game. What was it called? It was I think it was just called Peacocks. No, Enchanted Plumes. It had peacocks, and then you had to assemble the tails, and I had to design like peacock feathers for the tails, and they all had different designs and different colors on them. So each of the tail plumes had to have not only a different design, it had to have a different color too. But I had to make sure that all the different colors and the different designs didn't look too similar, because if you were colorblind, you had to be able to quickly differentiate that this plume and this plume were not the same card. So when you're playing a fast moving card game, you had to be able to tell the difference both in design and color. So so there's ways to do it both by turning a grayscale and but also there's now, I remember exactly where it is in Photoshop. But if you Google it, you can find it. It's somewhere in there. You can up in the settings. You can turn it on and off, where you can see different ways that it shows color blindness. So it's kind of cool. Yeah. It's just kind of cool to see your art the way other people see it. Sometimes it's just neat. Yeah. It's just neat to see. So if you haven't run it through, it's just neat to see how it looks. Yeah. So, but yeah. Anyway, yeah. So, but I think it looks cool anyway. So,
thank you.
Yeah, it just looks different. It's just neat to see how different people see different things.
Yeah.
So, you try turning your art upside down too. It's composition.
Yes, I do that a lot. And then, when you're assembling a puzzle, like you're often, especially with these very large ones, you're assembling them from different sides of the table. So yeah, I do that. I also make sure I will display my puzzle on, so I work on an iPad, right? So you're working on this little 1 foot-ish rectangle, but then I will display it on my TV, the biggest screen in the house, so I could see what it's going to look like at print size. And then I'll do things like I'll lay a grid over the image to make sure I have enough detail in there. But yeah, there's all these processes I go for. And actually, it's funny, I'm in the process of doing a set of circular puzzle designs that I'm making them so you can assemble them from any which angle. So they'll be nice and balanced, because we often have, when you have a group of people putting a puzzle together, I always tend to be the person who's like working on a puzzle upside down, because there's not enough room around the table.
That's true.
Yeah.
Wow, cool. All right, so we have somebody asked a question. Let's see. Does your guest have an opinion on how old original photos are archived, digitized and restored from scratches in discoloration, or better if kept on original stock and preserved chemically to keep its authenticity?
That's an interesting question, because I don't really work with photography too much, and all of the images I work with are completely digital at this point.
Yeah.
And I have like folders upon folders, and I honestly right now I rely quite a bit on iCloud and their search features, but just like folders upon folders upon folders upon.
Yeah.
I need to go through and organize them, honestly.
I do too.
Yeah.
Mine are all a mess. I need to organize them. I try to get them organized, but they're hard to keep track. So you end up with so many images. You're like, you ever just you spend so much time trying to figure out, where did I put that image I wanted?
Yeah, and sometimes it's easier just like reshoot an image, or especially if you have a family who could pose for you, and so. But yeah, if anybody else out there has questions, I'm happy to answer anything about graphic design, illustration, puzzles. I could talk about Saturnia too. I mentioned
you have a few more minutes. Tell us more about that.
So I'll plug that.
Yeah, so, a few more minutes to tell us about that. So
cool. So in addition to doing the illustration work, I have a novel series that I've been working on for quite a few years. It's called Saturnia. If you go to my website, you can find links to it. We currently have 3 books out and an audiobook. And it's basically a young adult fantasy novel series. Has a lot of the same elements you see in my illustrations. So you have castles, you have a race of cat-like people, you have technology, kind of steampunk elements to it. It's portal fantasy, where you have a teenage girl who goes through a portal in her basement to the world of Saturnia, which she didn't know existed prior to the start of the story. But I started doing that. Actually, that's the New York Comic-Con story. Like 10 years ago, I got a table at New York Comic-Con with a group of artists. And at the time, Saturnia was a webcomic. And I knew that I did not have enough time to make a nice print comic and make the show. But I had already written Saturnia as a novel. So I was like, you know what, why don't I figure out how to, I'm a graphic designer. I know how to do cover design. I could do this. So I had typeset it, and I produced it as a novel instead of a graphic novel. And I brought that to New York Comic-Con, and it sold quite well. So I kept selling them, and I kept writing more. And then eventually I partnered with an editor who had done, Keith DeCandido. He had done a lot of work for, I don't know if you've heard of him, because he did a lot of the New York shows, but he do work for Star Trek and Marvel and all of those. And he's been an editor. And so he edited all of my books for me. So it's something, it's like my passion project, basically. The illustration is my what keeps the lights on, and Saturnia is the fun little thing that I just keep playing with. And I'm constantly expanding it. Haven't put out a book in about a year or two, though, because baby. But, that's
a good excuse. We forgive you.
Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, I remember when you were doing the cover for that. I think when I saw you at AlexCon a couple of years ago, you were running some different cover designs about that. Yeah. So, but I'm glad it's going really good, though.
Yeah.
So, and where can people find that? On your website?
Yes. Yep. So if you go to rosecaffin.com, but if you search for Saturnia, Centernia, it's on, Amazon and all the major booksellers. Kindle has it, and then audiobooks. So I have a really gorgeous recording done by an individual who's done work for Walt Disney Company and Walt Disney Parks. She's Jamie Lynn Marcos. She did my audiobook, and I love it because she has the ability to really shift her, because some audiobook narrators, it's all very monotone, and she really shifts so you could, because it was very important to me that you could tell what character was speaking even if you didn't know. And it's just like a gorgeous recording, and that's out on Audible and Spotify and several other audiobook platforms. Once again, if you go to my website, you can find the trail of links that will lead you there, or you can message me. I'm of course on all the social media, but social media is such a tricky landscape right now, which is, previously I would have been like, oh yeah, my Instagram handle is RoseCatCon, and go to this and that and Facebook. And now I'm like, when this comes out, I don't even know what will the state of social media be. So just like go to my website, because that's the stable home base. I don't know, Echo, if you're finding the same thing as far as how you think about how you're putting out your marketing now, because it's changed. Everything's changed.
It's changing. Yeah, it's really interesting right now. Things are changing rapidly, so I'm just trying to keep up with everything. I'm on Blue Sky right now, and I'm still on Facebook.
I need to follow you on Blue Sky. I'm on there too.
I'm on there too. It's growing, but what's funny though? I'm on Facebook, and I've been on it a long time, and it hasn't grown very much until just about a couple of weeks ago. I did a black and white coloring book for a company, and then I had somebody accuse me of being AI. And it blew up, and all of a sudden, I just responded to it. Like, I just responded to it, and I posted all this stuff about showing my work and everything like that. And it totally just blew up, and I got like all these follows and shares, and people like just sharing my posts and everything, and it just, I got like so many followers from that my response.
Right.
It was kind of crazy. I was like, wow, that went totally viral. That was very strange.
Yeah.
I mean, I tried to respond very diplomatically and not angrily, just responded, sharing how my thoughts on it and everything, because you have to be civil and such. So
it's so tough, because your work is so beautiful and your style so clean. So I can understand why people would look at it and be like, oh, maybe could that be? But I mean, it's the way you have always worked, like these gorgeous because you also tend to do Art Nouveau theming, and that's something I've seen.
That's probably because AI was trained off of my
stole
work,
from you.
That's because they stole off of my work. It also takes me hours and hours to get it that clean. So, but all right. So we got just a few more minutes. Is there anything else you want to add on?
I'm also see if anybody has any questions here.
Any questions?
I've talked about puzzles. I've talked about Echo, why don't you talk about what you have going on? Because I mean, I feel like I've told everybody my life story. What I am.
Oh, that's we're here to hear your life story. Are your kids still staring at you through your window?
I don't know where they are, and that's a good.
No, they're doing they're doing their crafts still. They're doing their Christmas crafts.
I'm going to be sad when this conversation is over, because I'm going to have to go back in there and be mom and see what kind of mess my child, my daughter has created on the table. Because right now, my daughter's doing the whole Christmas crafting thing, making gifts for my parents and my in-laws, and it's nice. It's wonderful. Like, it's, I feel like everything I don't know if you've ever found this when your mom, like, you want to be like, yes, I appreciate the things my kids do, and I love like the exuberance at which they do things and their creativity and all the things they do. But at the end of the day, there's always like a little trail of messes that you're going to have to chase after, and so it's like everything is bittersweet. But yeah, so that's what we're doing right now, and they got the Christmas. Oh, somebody messaged me. I'll just ignore that. But yeah, so that's it. And I can talk about the Ravensburger thing, the big again, the beginning of this conversation, I was like, oh, I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the conversation. My most recent project that I did for Ravensburger.
Your gigantic project. Yes.
Yeah. So
1 minute.
And that was
1
minute. Yeah.
1 minute. Go.
It's called the Six Portals, and you can look for it because we haven't released all the images yet for it, but it is going to be 7,000 piece puzzle. It is huge, 6 feet. It
Oh my
is all these
gosh.
different fantasy worlds kind of linked together, the kind of Art Nouveau frames actually on each of the images. And that's going to be coming out from Ravensburger next year. So if you watch my social media and my website and you are a puzzle junkie, this is going to be such a good challenge. Lots of
Wow.
beautiful little details.
You're supposed to be able to get that done in like an hour, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Wow. I
Yeah.
can't wait to see
Okay.
that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So
All right.
good, good,
Well,
good. All right.
thank you for joining me on
Thank
the
you so
Virtual
much.
Artist. You have been listening to 1077 United Public Radio Network. And thank you again, Rose. And it's rosecatcon.com. And everyone else, keep making great art. And thank you for sharing all your stories and how you
Oh,
overcome
thank you. Thank you
everything.
so much.
So, and I'll see you hopefully soon. I haven't seen you in a while, so hopefully we'll get together soon. So,
Yeah.
everyone else,
Okay.
I will
Cool.
see you next week. Bye.
Awesome.